Freddie, did you know that when the Blob oozed onto screens in 1958, audiences were terrified of a slow-moving gelatinous menace, proof that even Jell-O can be deadly with the right soundtrack? Steve McQueen, in his first starring role, tried to outrun it with all the urgency of a teenager, despite being nearly 30. Today we're creating our own Blob, but this one's powered by geometry nodes. Welcome to Blending with Algernon. I am Sir Algernon, Blender Instructor Extraordinaire, and this is my faithful squire, Freddie. Today we are working in Blender version 4.4.0. First task, clear the canvas. Let's create a plane mesh for our geometry node to live on. Thank you, Freddie. Now let's split the view. Switch the bottom window to the geometry node editor and press New at the top of that window. Go ahead and delete the group input node. We won't be needing it. In its place, add a volume cube node. It's a fascinating little node, Freddie. You're going to love it. It may not look like much just yet, but with a bit of help, it's going to flourish hideously. Add a gradient texture node, plug it into the density input, and set the gradient to spherical. What you've got now is essentially a cotton ball in a box. But wait, it does get better. Now add a volume to mesh node to give it some substance, something my second ex-wife swore I never had. As you can see, we've now got a lovely, complex sphere to play with, and things are about to get even more interesting with the addition of a noise texture. Our goal is to mix the two textures and see how well they get along. Add a mix node, plug the noise textures factor into input B, and connect the gradient textures color to the mix factor. Set input A to black, and then plug the result into the density input of our volume cube. Excellent, Freddie. We've created a meatball, a solid start on our journey to Blobdom. Now let's smooth it out a bit with a set smooth node. While it does look rather grotesque in its current state, we can certainly do better. Just after the noise texture, add a color ramp, so we can dial in the hideousness with a bit more finesse. Yes, Freddie, that's looking absolutely repulsive. I love it. The sliders on the color ramp are doing a lovely job of gnawing at the meatball. Much like Hamlet's conscience, this noise is slowly eating away at the soul of our geometry, pixel by pixel. All right, time for materials. Add a set material node at the end, then head over to the Properties panel on the right. Select the Materials tab, add a new texture, and name it Blob. Don't forget to match the texture name in the Set Material node as well. Switch to the shader editor and add a layer weight node along with a color ramp. We want the facing normals of our grotesqueness to influence the color. Plug the color ramp's output into the emission color of the principled BSDF. Give it a nice strength, let's say around 12. Now, let's switch to render view to see the results. It looks like an exploding snowball, frozen at the very peak of its detonation. I like it, but I think we can do better. We're aiming for more of a cell-shaded look, rather than the soft gradients we have right now. Switch the color ramp from linear to constant, and slide the whites in a bit. This will create a hard edge between the blacks and whites. In the color ramp, we want to create distinct steps from one extreme to the other. Start by choosing a base color. I think green makes a fine starting point. Then, click the plus symbol to add a few additional points along the ramp. 5 points in total should give us that cell-shaded feel. Spread them out as you see fit and gradually adjust the color of each point. That's looking good, Freddie. Now it's time to animate. Switch back to the geometry node editor, and let's have a little fiddle with our noise texture. Zoom in on our noise texture. We're about to recruit time as our animator by switching from 3D to 4D. Remember, Freddie, as the late, great Douglas Adams once said, time is an illusion, lunchtime doubly so. As you can see, our new W input brings the noise to life, but I'd like it to feel a bit more blobby. Let's lower the scale to, say, 1.5. Yes, our blob is blossoming beautifully. Now it's time to make a few adjustments so the motion loops seamlessly. Start by duplicating the noise texture and adding a mix node. Connect the second noise texture to input B. We'll need the W inputs of the two textures to be inverse of each other. So, create a value node as the input, plug it into the W of the first noise texture, and into the factor of the mix node. For the second noise texture, multiply that value by -1 and plug it into its W input. Next, in the timeline, increase the total frames to 500 and move the playhead to frame 0. Set the driving value for our W's to 1. Hover over the value field and press I to insert a keyframe. Then move the playhead to the final frame and repeat the process, this time setting the value to -1. The inverse values will ensure a loop. Marvelous. If one blob delights, then 3 shall dazzle. Wouldn't you agree, Freddy? Time to get a bit posh and organized. Select all the nodes, excluding our noble value node and its inverted companion. Press Ctrl+J to bundle them up, then F2 to christen the group with a proper name, Blob1. Now, duplicate the group and rename it Blob2. We'll stitch them together with a join geometry node. Simple as that. As for the look, let's give Blob 2 its own sense of style. Create a new material, select Material Blob 1 from the drop-down, and click the duplicate icon. Rename this new material to Blob 2, just to keep things tidy. Then, update the Set Material node to use Blob 2. Back in the shader editor, let's give Blob 2 its own identity. Change all the colors in the color ramp to varying shades of blue, just as we did with the greens, but with a cooler temperament. Now, we need to hook up our animation drivers in the geometry node editor. Connect our value node to our Blob 2 group in the same way as we did with Blob 1 and also the inverse value. By using the same value node, we don't need to re-keyframe Blob 2. Efficient and everything in sync. Perhaps a bit too in sync. At the moment, both blobs are occupying the same space. How terribly awkward. Let's give Blob 2 a bit of breathing room. Add a transform geometry node and connect it to the end of Blob 2, just before the join geometry node. Then rotate it, say, 180 degrees along all 3 axes. That should do the trick. Oozingly disgusting, Freddy. I absolutely love it. All we need now is a third blob to complete our gloriously grotesque trifecta. Select the Blob 2 node group and duplicate it. The more the messier. And don't forget to duplicate the transform geometry node as well. We'll need to offset Blob 3, just like we did with its predecessor. Connect the output of the new transform node to our join geometry node, and let's give Blob 3 a spin, literally. Pick some different rotation values to make it stand out. And remember, Freddy, these rotations can be whatever you fancy. Go on, indulge yourself. Next, Blob 3 deserves a wardrobe of its own. Head over to the Material tab in the Properties panel, create a new material, select one of our previous blobs, and hit the duplicate icon. Rename it accordingly. Blob 3, naturally. Then set the Set Material node in Blob 3's node chain to use this new material. And while we're at it, let's give our new node group a proper name. Blob 3, of course. Presentation matters, Freddy. Pop back into the shader editor for Blob 3 and, yes, you guessed it, time to change the color spectrum. Let's go with a bold, juicy red this time. A bit of drama never hurt anyone, eh, Freddy? Now, Let's hook up our value driver to the third and final blob group, just as we did with the others. No need for more keyframing, thank heavens. Give it a spin, Freddy. Utterly undulating and delightfully disgusting, just the way we like it. Right then, let's add a camera so we can properly admire our oozy masterpiece. Press numpad 1 for a front view, then hit Ctrl-Alt and numpad 0 to snap the camera into position. Let's give our blob trio a bit of dramatic flair, shall we? Add an area light and position it just behind and slightly below our subjects. Set the shape to disk, scale it up for full effect, and crank the power to around 500 watts. Backlighting, because even blobs deserve a bit of glamour. Now let's set the mood. Head over to the world settings in the properties panel and black out the background. Nice and dramatic. Then hop into the compositor and tick Use Nodes. Add a glare node, set it to bloom, and prepare for some visual magic. To actually see the effect, switch your viewport shading settings to Compositor Always. Because if you're going to make blobs glow, you might as well go all in. Hit play. I'm getting goosebumps, Freddy. For our final bit of animation, let's add a bit of elegant motion. I'd like the camera and light to orbit our lovely blob ensemble. First, create an empty. Then, select the camera, followed by the empty, and press Ctrl+P. Choose Object, Keep Transform, to parent the camera to the empty. Select the light and repeat the parenting process. Now, select the empty by itself and move the playhead in the timeline to 0. Keyframe the rotation of the empty to 0 degrees. Then move the playhead to the end and keyframe the rotation to 360 degrees. Let's take a look. Go to camera view and hit play. Perfect. Steve McQueen would be proud, Freddy. Final bits, head to the render settings in the properties panel and tick both Ray Trace and Freestyle. In the Freestyle section, set the line thickness to 2. This will add bold, comic book style outlines to our blobs. Perfect for that graphic novel flair we're after. You won't see the effect in the viewport, so go ahead and hit Render Image to behold the final masterpiece. A bit much? Let's bring the freestyle line thickness down a touch, maybe 1.5, then render image again. Better. Now under the View Layer tab in the Properties panel, we can scroll way down and see additional freestyle options which we will take advantage of. You can go crazy here with the stroke options, but we shall restrain ourselves to simply adding an additional edge type, suggestive contours. Render image again. Yes, that works a treat. But let's give our blobs an extra dose of smoothness, shall we? Pop back into the geometry node editor and increase the resolution in the volume cube node. Let's set it to 100. Fair warning, Freddy, this might make your machine huff and puff a bit, but the results will be well worth it. Apply this treatment to all 3 blobs. Hit play and watch it chug along. Freddy, are we still running this on your old Commodore 64? Perhaps best to render a still image for now. No need to melt the poor thing. I think we've got it. Select your output of choice and hit the magic render button. Ah, a face only a mother could love, eh, Freddy? Personally, I find this blob far more intriguing than the Steve McQueen version. Someone ring up John Carpenter. We have work to do. And that wraps up another episode of Blending with Algernon. Thank you ever so much for spending your time with us. If you've had a laugh, learned a little, or just enjoyed watching digital goo wiggle about, do be a dear and hit that like, subscribe, and share button. Working files are tucked neatly in the notes below, because we're nothing if not civilized. Until next time, keep blending brilliantly.